HogvilleNET YouTube Live, joining you on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Beautiful on many reasons. John Calipari. Let's look at the report card real quick. It's HogvilleNET YouTube Live. You know we come on when things start shaking and baking in Arkansas Razorbacks basketball. John Calipari report card. I mean, he's the guy who's got an A+ right now in recruiting since joining Arkansas. I guess what are we going on now? 4 weeks, but 4 for 4 on Monday commitments. Adou Thiero. It's the second Kentucky transfer to follow Calipari to Fayetteville, from Lexington to Fayetteville. Adou Thiero, very talented and versatile. We're going to talk about this versatility. 6'8" wing, took a visit to Arkansas midweek last week. We've seen most of the commitments after a visit kind of happen really quickly. This one took a few days longer. I thought it might take a couple more days. I'll explain that as well. But off the board on Monday, 4 for 4 on Monday commitments, by the way, since being announced. I remember Calipari was introduced in April on a Wednesday. The following Monday, the first recruit was his first player to follow him from Kentucky, Big Z, Zvonimir Ivicic. And that was the first player on a Monday. The following Monday, Carter Knox, 5-star, one of 3 5-star high school recruits, the first of 3 to commit to Calipari. Then the following Monday, last week, Jonas Adou, the 6'11" All-SEC center, transfer from Tennessee, so SEC to SEC. And then today, Adou Thiero, another SEC to SEC. So we've seen 3 of the 4 commits coming out of the transfer portal coming from the SEC, 2 of those 3 coming from Kentucky. So we're going to talk about the importance of multiple things. We're also going to talk about other players Arkansas is going to be, who I think probably zeroing in on here as we move forward. Maybe an adjustment to make on what we thought might happen as well. But Adou Thiero at 6'8", a big wing, 3-4 combo, the way I look at him. And I think he's a guy that, because he continues to grow and how sturdy he is, 6'8", 225, pushing 230-ish, can defend, I think, up to 5 positions. I think in a small ball situation, he could defend, help a little bit if needed even defending at the 5 spot. I'm not saying he could play that on the offensive end. You'd have to probably play some kind of 5 out and get him run into those dunker spots. But on defense, I think he's so versatile. And I understand why Jonathan Genovi, ESPN Draft Express lead draft analyst, has him projected in the 2025 draft, a year from now, as a potential first-round pick. Has him going in the late first round, in the 20s there, just as a projection. It's a young man that has grown quite a bit. I think when he arrived at Kentucky, he was a freshman. He was around 6'5", 6'6". They list him at 6'8". Now he continues to get bigger. And I noticed, again, he can defend. I mean, here was a guy that was groomed. He grew up, as much as he's grown, kind of a late rush. He reminds you a little bit of a Scottie Pippen. Now, I'm not saying he's that kind of talent, but Pippen was a point guard. He was a point guard, a 6-footish point guard, and sprung up to 6'8" in his time at UCA. Thiero got a similar growth spurt, not exactly the same, but also coming positionally, a guy that has handled the ball as a guard. Now he's a big wing. I think he's a 3-4. I think he can help you at the 4. Can defend, I think, 1 through 5. I think he can defend guards, wings, and bigs. And not saying that it's ideal that he's guarding any one or certain positions for extended periods of time, but he brings that kind of versatility. This is a big commitment, in my opinion, for several reasons. One is what we just talked about, the versatility. And you're talking about a guy that can be perimeter and some front court help on the defensive end, in some ways offense too. I think there's a lot of options for Calipari in different personnel groupings that he wants to have. And Theo helps you be versatile, helps you to have versatility when you start talking about some of your matchup ideas on the offensive end, is in addition to what he can do defensively. But I think the other part that matters here, when I start really looking now at the 7th commitment, I mentioned 4 commits on 4 Mondays since Calipari's been hired. It's also the 7th commit out of 8 players who have visited since Calipari's been here. We know, so that's all 7 commitments that who are on board. We'll go through the names here in a little bit just to kind of checklist it. But the lone case being Brandon Garrison, who ended up committing to Kentucky, I think the day after his Arkansas visit concluded. But that was because Jonas Adou was Arkansas's first option, and the demands for NIL really didn't match where Arkansas was to begin with. Had Arkansas not even landed Adou, I don't know that Arkansas was able to get to where Brandon Garrison wanted to NIL-wise. But Kentucky managed to do something in that regard. And so that's why we saw Brandon Garrison off the board. But having said all that, 7 out of 8 visitors have committed to Arkansas. I mentioned 3 of the 4 that have done it on Mondays are out of the SEC in terms of being transfers. And now we know when you start looking at this roster, and I started talking about how Adou Thiero brings you versatility into the lineup. Well, let's go through what Arkansas's got. We talked about Big Z already, the first off the board. 7'2", 4'5". He's a center. He can stretch the floor a little bit. You could see him on the floor with Jonas Adou potentially at the 4 spot. They might even be interchangeable 4-5s because Adou's athletic versatility and his ability to play above a defense with quickness for his size at 6'11". So you got 7'2", 6'11" on your front line. We know that. To me, Adou Thiero, given everybody else who's committed, we're going to go through that, is another guy that you could slot in, again, as a 3-4 combo. So that means he's giving you help on that front line depth. This is now potentially a third piece to helping solve what you might need. Line up to line up, match up to match up, personnel package versus personnel package. And then anytime you have injuries or foul trouble, this is a guy that can help you on your front line. It's a versatile piece that helps give you some depth on that front line. So you could argue that in part, this is some depth at your 4 spot as a 3-4 combo. So I think that's important. 6'8", sturdily built, 2 years under Calipari. And when we start talking about the versatility, again, when you look at your backcourt, you're talking, we know John L. Davis, the top portal player in the portal prospect around, just came off the board, Arkansas. He was the most recent commit prior to today, going all the way back to Tuesday of last week, coming off the board a day after Jonas Adou. But Davis at 6'4", can score, can really combo it. I mean, he's a guy you could put the ball in his hands, a la Antonio Reeves, who could run offense for you, set things up for himself and others. There are times where you could actually turn the ball over to him. But I think Adou, being a potential elite defender, certainly a plus defender at a 3-4 spot, certainly when you start talking about the matchups, the versatility matchup-wise defensively, 1 through 3, what he can defend, and then John L. Davis, who I think will be a plus defender. Now you've got 2 pieces together there. So there's more of groupings and packaging if you want to have a defensive lineup. Those 2 guys check boxes. We know John L. Davis can score as well. He's a big-time scorer, but he just does a lot of things. And so when you look at the freshmen, Carter Knox, 6'6", Billy Richmond, 6'6", these are all 5-star guys based on one service or another, or the composite rankings. And then Boogie Flan, 6'2", combo guard. You're talking about a talent-rich backcourt, and because of Thiero's versatility, now I've named all the other 6 commitments. But Adou Thiero coming in as the 7th, you can see how Calipari now has a ton of options as he starts to package together backcourt groupings and how they will defend and how they will play offensively, and then front court as well. Because again, I think Adou Thiero helps with your front court depth in a need, and even possibly by design. Sometimes we'll see how things play out. You never know how players are going to be when you bring them all together. The other thing I like about having now 2 players, and I think there'll be more, but now you've got 2 players from Kentucky's portal. So we started talking about, you got, half of Kentucky's signed high school class, 3 5-stars. So you got half of what they had. 2 of the remaining 3 were off to other destinations, and then you've got 1 player left over. So Calipari, between what Arkansas and Kentucky kept out of that 6-player signed class, Calipari got 75% of that grouping. Again, those 5-star backcourt pieces. There's versatility there. But when I really start thinking about, okay, Jonas Adou, top 10, top 15 portal pickup, when you look at the rankings, just mentioned John L. Davis, arguably the number 1 prospect in the portal. Some services had him there. He's consensus top 3. Also, we'll talk a little bit more about where he is with the pro ball stuff a little bit later. This is mostly going to be about Adou Thiero, but we need to go through other stuff. But when we talk about getting that kind of high-level guys out of the transfer portal with experience, Elite 8 experience for Jonas Adou, Final Four experience 2 years ago for John L. Davis. Now you've got Adou Thiero, who's got John Calipari experience. Big Z, 15 games last year as a freshman. Didn't get cleared till the midpoint, played in only 15 games. He brings some program continuity, but a guy like Adou Thiero, Here's a guy that's played for Calipari for 2 years in the system. So I think it's valuable not only to get college experience, guys who have had success at the Division One level, getting in, especially when you look at them individually, what they did. They're all league honors, you know, co-American Athletic Conference Player of the Year for John L. Davis. We know Jonas Adou was all SEC second team and SEC all defensive team. So you got individual honors, you've got statistics, but you've got postseason success. But I think the continuity going from Kentucky to Arkansas, guys who know what Calipari expects, whether it's what you do to prepare for it, off the court, on the court, practice habits, all kinds of things where these guys are going to be valuable in helping that flow of continuity because he's brought, we know this now, most of his coaching staff and bringing back Kenny Payne, who's been with him for years before the 2 years at Louisville. So in essence, Calipari's bringing a lot of continuity on coaching staff and now with some players. He's doubled up what he's bringing out of UK portal. First off the board was Big Z. Most recent, your seventh commitment now is also your second player from Kentucky in Adou Thiero. So I think in those ways that Kentucky experience matters because it's Calipari experience. In other words, all 13 of your guys, if you fill out a 13-man roster, aren't brand new to John Calipari and what his expectations are. I think that will be important in helping build a team. Not only because we know the talent's there, we see that already through 7 commitments. I mean, this was a highly coveted guy. Remember, Adou Thiero visited Arkansas midweek last week. He'd been he's a Pittsburgh native, been on campus at Pitt. Calipari goes to Pittsburgh. Remember that? He dropped the photo of him hanging out with buddies in Pittsburgh, but we knew he wasn't just there to have cocktails and a nice dinner with old friends. He was there to recruit, and this is what the fruits of that are. He did that visit a week or so ago. Next few days after that, you see Adou Thiero on campus. A few days later, he committed to Arkansas. His birthday's May 8th, by the way. 2 days. That's Wednesday, midweek. And I thought maybe he was waiting to do this on his birthday. Nope. Drops on a Monday afternoon. I mentioned 4 out of 4 on Monday commits. Every Monday since Calipari, since he was formally hired, every Monday since, Arkansas's had a commitment drop. So we've gone through some of those stats on that. But Adou Thiero being on board, to me, is a huge deal for multiple reasons. I've gone through a lot of it. Thank you again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please drop down and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We appreciate you and tuning into our content. And if you will, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you if you have. Pope coming to Arkansas as a grad assistant. Well, okay. Well, we need to talk more, I think, also about when we look at now more than half the roster field. I think that's also important because the move-in date, you typically in the first summer sessions, typically the first week of June, move-in date kind of the end of May, that Memorial Day weekend. I think the first session of summer classes at Arkansas actually is a little bit earlier. It may actually start in late May. And so you're trying to get as many guys on campus now that we're in the early part of May, the first weekend. You're trying to get guys on campus. You get guys ready to be on campus, which means you got to get them committed and signed. We just talked about John L. Davis. He was a guy that I reported on my Pig Trail Nation segment yesterday that we put out that he was not invited into the NBA Draft Combine. That list of 78 players came out. He was not on it. He was not invited. He was invited, however, to the following list that comes out after the Combine invites go. By the way, the Combine invites are based on the guys most likely to be drafted in the first and second round, 60 picks. They took 78, but those are the guys that NBA teams, the feedback was, these are the most likely to get drafted. Then your G League Elite Camp list comes out, 44 players. For the second season, postseason in a row, John L. Davis was invited to G League Elite Camp. Now, what's interesting about G League Elite Camp, 2-day camp, you're competing, it's 5-on-5 games, and a select handful, up to 10 players will be invited to move on from the best performers, top performers, invited from G League Elite Camp to go on to the Combine. So the Combine numbers are going to grow a little bit, anywhere from where the current invites were to 78 to bring it up maybe to the mid 80s there when it's all said and done when the Combine started. There's reporting out there. I mentioned Jonathan Givony from ESPN/Draft Express earlier in this segment, but he reported over the weekend that John L. Davis has declined the G League Elite Camp invite. So you're saying, okay, we know that he signed a financial aid agreement with Arkansas. We know he publicly committed. We know it was reported that he committed. He didn't was not invited to the combine, draft combine, was invited to elite camp, but turned that down. But Javoni's reporting also includes this nugget, which is important, that Davis is still going to have workouts, meetings, etc., with select NBA teams. That he still plans to do that. Okay, well, if that's true, that means he's still in the NBA draft pool. He has till May 29th to withdraw from that to maintain eligibility, participate in his fifth season, his COVID fifth year, as a two-time senior, I guess, at Arkansas next season. So May 29th is the deadline. So until he withdraws from that, he's leaving his options open. His options seem to be dwindling based on what I just told you. On the, he was not projected to be. We already had known that he was really not projected to go in the first two rounds. It may end up being one of those free agent two-way guys if it came to that. And a lot of that will be also based on performances, not only in what you would maybe do in a G League elite camp if you participated, or if you were able to use that to get into the combine, but then there's going to be summer league play. By that point, you'd already be done with your college stuff and moving on. So he's left the door cracked for some of these possibilities. Just bear that in mind. All right, so let's move back to the point at hand here, because I think Arkansas, when I start now looking at the landscape of what's still out there and what Arkansas needs to focus on, the Adou Thiero helps clear some things up. I think in some ways that does help clear some things up. All right, 16.5 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Adou Thiero, the Kentucky transfer, second Wildcat out of the Wildcat portal to follow John Calipari to Arkansas. Big Z, now another piece. We look at size positionally. Only Boogie Fland at 6'2" doesn't check a box as being big for the position he's been recruited to. But he brings it so many other elements and craftiness and shiftiness, and a top 15 rated 5-star according to ESPN. You understand that with him, it's not the size package, it's more about the skill package and the quickness package and some of the cerebral stuff he brings to his craft. But having said that, everywhere else, you're talking about big players so far. And I think that's been Calipari's trademark when you go back to Kentucky and all those teams that excelled when you started talking about rebounding teams, offensive rebounding teams. And in transition, it's not just size, it's length and athleticism, guys that can get out and run that race. We just had the Kentucky Derby over the weekend. Sometimes in Lexington, right? Sometimes some of those rosters that Calipari puts together, and you watch that big blue train run, you got big guys out running, filling those lanes, getting out in transition. I always thought some of his better teams were not only great on the glass, but also great in transition. So you start looking at guys like Adou Thiero, and you understand, man, this guy checks a ton of boxes. We go through him statistically. I haven't done that yet. Last year as a sophomore, over 7 points per game, 5 rebounds. I think he averaged over a steal per game. But what I really like about him, you look at his shooting splits, over 49% from the field, 80% from the free throw line. You like that. 3-point shooting, just over 31%. Not a crazy volume guy there, but a work in progress. But even that's respectable, 31%. It's not just horrific below 30. It's something you can work with. And again, when you looked at him, I think he started the season pretty quickly, had a double-double against Kansas, top 10 rated Kansas team in a narrow loss for the Wildcats, and I think in November. But I think it was like 16 points, 13 rebounds. Those were both career highs at the time. Only 5 games last year scoring in double figures, but 3 of those were in SEC games. I mentioned his stats against Kansas. And then when Kentucky played Gonzaga later in the year, I had a double-figure scoring game there. So it wasn't like the few times he did on a loaded. You talk about a team that was a high-octane offensive team, but a lot of that offense went through that backcourt, the true backcourt, when you started talking about their 1s and 2s at Kentucky. Guys who right now are in the not only invited to the NBA draft combine, but several of them projected as first rounders, even lottery picks. So, even on a high scoring team, Thiero was caught up a little bit in a numbers game there. Not making excuses, because when you look at his efficiency relative to his stats, it was solid. And again, 7.2 points, 5 rebounds, really solid season for him last year. 2 years now under Calipari, and I think that brings a lot of value to this Arkansas roster, just in terms of that Calipari knowledge, experience, along with Big Z. And I think we may see more on that. We're going to talk a little bit about what's next, what could be next, because I think it's going to be another busy week. I mentioned some of these these date markers coming up for move in and first summer first session, you're wanting to get guys on board and get where you're not scrambling. Now, I'm not saying Arkansas is going to have 13 filled out by the end of the month, but you want to get. I'm guessing if you're John Calipari, you want to get to at least 10 by that point. Yeah, Theo may still be growing, by the way. 6'8", I mentioned between 220, 230, and he may still be growing. I mean, that it's amazing. When you look at the guy, I mean, he looks like when I saw him check in against Arkansas this year, I'm like, man, he's bigger. I could see it immediately. I knew the measurements, what they said he had grown, but just seeing him and then seeing him in person in Fayetteville, and remembering the season before, I mean, it was considerable, just the eye test. So if he's still growing, I mean, that adds more intrigue to what this guy brings to the table. But again, I like now that you've got a guy that, I mean, I'm telling that this guy can help you defend 5 positions. Take my word for it. We'll see the proof in practice when the rubber meets the road and we get into the season. But I really believe that based on everything I've watched and looked at. And I'm not saying you could put him on a 5 and go 20 minutes doing that. I'm just saying he could help you in spots. We're frozen up here. I've got a frozen screen. I don't know if you guys did. It froze up for me for about 5 seconds there. All right, moving forward, I really kind of want to get into what I think Arkansas still needs. I think a lead guard with experience. It could be a combo guard, could be a point guard. DJ Wagner seems like the obvious answer. Recently visited USC. For the last 2 weeks, I've heard rumors he's either on campus at Arkansas or soon to be on campus. And it could be one of those sneaky stealth John Calipari. Now you don't see him, you don't know about it, you don't see him. It could be one of those deals like we had with John L. Davis. Was hearing the same stuff around him and could never get it confirmed that he was there, get photo evidence, any of that. Just felt like it probably happened. So DJ Wagner, is he somebody else who's another transfer from Kentucky that we see maybe come off the board soon, maybe later? Went and visited USC. I mean, Eric Musselman got him out on a visit. Apparently, his girlfriend plays on the women's team, Juju Watkins at USC. Apparently, that's his girlfriend based on reports, so I don't know if that's true. But that would be an enticing reason, obviously, if you're dating someone, to maybe to go to that left coast and get part of that USC program. But Wagner would be a big get if he, in fact, when you look at the relationships between John Calipari, Kenny Payne, and his family, because it is a basketball family. You go back to Milt Wagner at Louisville. We know Kenny Payne also played at Louisville, coached at Louisville. DJ Wagner's father, DeJuan Wagner, playing for Cal at Memphis. This is just, there's so many connections there. When we're really talking about the business of basketball, I think following Cal to Arkansas is the best scenario for him. He's going to make that decision. But I do think that when you start talking about, I mentioned Boogie Fland earlier, true freshman, going to get his run, going to get his minutes, going to have a role. But you look at Kentucky last year. Look at the Dillingham. Look at Wagner. Look at Reed Sheppard. Now, Sheppard and Dillingham are projected top 15 guys in the upcoming draft. But all those guys took turns, and I saw it in person at Bud Walton Arena, let alone the times I watched Kentucky play on TV. Was all those guys were primary handlers at different stages of that game. We saw more of Reed Sheppard on the ball in the second half. Dillingham, in fact, in that game didn't play. He did in the second game, and he played on the ball in the late stages of the game. DJ Wagner had a good game against Arkansas when Arkansas played in Kentucky and knocked down some threes, but Wagner, 10 points per game, nearly 3.5 assists, a better than 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, and a guy that when he looked at his 3-point shooting, okay, not great, just hovering around 30%, just under that 29+%. Those are areas he was dealing with a high ankle sprain that cost him some games, and that cost him some, I think, some efficiency and productions dealing with that and trying to play through that and around it and get all the way back. So I think those were things that prevented what was once upon a time the number 1 rated player in that class of 2023. He was a McDonald's All-American, by the way, but I think he would be a great fit in a lead guard spot, especially when you start looking around at what's left in the portal. We know we've passed the portal deadline for getting in. A lot of players have already moved on. Davion Smith committing to Rick Pitino and St. John's earlier. Kadari Richmond's a big guard out of Seton Hall that was thought to be a lock. Supposedly Pitino and St. John's are still recruiting him, but a guy that Arkansas has contacted and been on. Could he be in the works? To me, DJ Wagner probably makes the most sense because of that program continuity, because of those relationships, because of his talent, his ability still. Again, solid stuff. Someone's posted here, and thank you for putting that. If that's accurate, Wagner was shooting 40% or better from three, around 40% at least before the ankle injury. Again, so those things can screw you up. Even when you get healthy, it just changes. Can change what if you're favoring that ankle and playing, putting more weight bearing on the other foot. That'll affect your shot. Just being rusty and dealing with an injury can affect everything, all your mechanics, everything. Again, it sounds like excuse making, but injuries are valid, especially when they do have impact on some things that may not tell the whole story without understanding what the injury, how that might have played into it. But I mentioned Kadari Richmond. There are other guys out there when you start talking about lead guard spot, but those are the two names that pop out to me immediately. But I think DJ Wagner, again, seems to make the most sense. Let's see what happens there. Let's see if Southern Cal has a real angle after getting him out for a visit. Not sure what's been true on him being in Fayetteville, if that ever really happened. But boy, I had folks coming at me who are often right about things, saying that just do your best to uncover this, and I never could. Or maybe it's coming up if it hasn't already. I think something that was also interesting, we talk about what Arkansas needs. I mentioned the lead guard spot. I think Arkansas still needs a minimum of two frontline pieces. A four, maybe someone who can stretch the floor. Kason Pryor, South Florida. I mean, this guy, 21 starts last year, played in 32 games, 13 points, 8 rebounds per game, good three-point shooter, over 35%, so that's solid. But here's a guy to me that I really like. He's got some swagger to his game. He's 6'10", so he's going to bang on that glass. I mentioned the 8 rebounds per game, but he can stretch your floor. He can handle a little bit for a big. He's got some pizzazz and some real craft, facing the basket all the way out to the three-point line. And so I really think there's someone else to keep an eye on. Look, I talked about Adou Thiero and the fact that Calipari was in the Pittsburgh area, was in Pittsburgh and was up to see him. Then you get him on campus. Calipari was at a wedding, apparently, Florida. He mentioned everyone in the photo, everybody to do with that wedding just a few days ago were Florida folks. And who all's in Florida? Well, just going through it. Just going through it. I just mentioned Kason Pryor, South Florida. Mentioned Arkansas needing, help at the lead guard spot. Well, we talk about DJ Wagner. He'd be a guy coming from Kentucky, a transfer there. We talked about Terry Richmond. So we're not talking about that position group necessarily for lead guard help when we talk about this Florida trip. But what we are talking about, again, I talk about Arkansas needing a forward, a big forward, a guy that can stretch the floor, can help you at the 5 spot if needed. That's Kason Pryor. South Florida won a very good mid-major American Athletic Conference last year. First place team, 16-2 in the league, and he was a big part of that. I went through his stats. Arkansas not only contacted him, I think Arkansas is probably in the final 3 on this one, based on just stuff I'm gathering from behind the scenes. I really feel like Arkansas is in the running for Kason Pryor. He put out eyeball emojis on Saturday. Calipari was in that state, but there are other players from that state. One of them who I think is very interesting that Arkansas, the guy averaged a double-double in 2 games against Arkansas this year, was Vanderbilt sophomore Vin-Allen Lubin. 6'8", versatile guy, really made a huge jump. You talk about Jonas Adou making a huge jump by his junior season at Tennessee. Well, Vin-Allen Lubin on a bad Vanderbilt team, but a team that split 2 games with Arkansas, averaged 20 points and 11 rebounds against the Hogs. He had a double-double in both of those games. Big-time guy. He's an Orlando, Florida native. I don't know what Vanderbilt's semester situation's like. I don't know. A lot of schools are already finished up with the academic year, and maybe he was back home in Florida, and Calipari was there to see him. But a versatile 6'8" forward, perfect 4-spot guy, can face the basket, athletic, attacks the glass. But just going back through his stats last season, 12.3 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, averaged a block at 6'8" per game, 58% from the field only 67.7% of the free throw line. You can live with that. But he made 1 out of 3 every time he shot a three ball. 39 three attempts on the year, so roughly 1 per game, a little over 1 attempt per game. But a guy that can stretch the floor a little bit as well. So I think when you start talking Case and Pryor, South Florida, Van Allen, Lubin, again, 6'8" forward, Pryor 6'10". Both of those guys would fit in great at the 4 spot. We know Norshad Amir off the board, the transfer from Miami to Baylor. A guy's had average a double-double all 4 years of his college career. First 2 at Arkansas State, the last 2 at Miami. All-American guy, all-ACC guy, 17-10 last year. Had a big asking price tag for NIL, and I don't think Arkansas was in the mix, but I don't think Arkansas was willing to step it up to where maybe he wanted to be. Off the board of Baylor, that's okay. There's still some quality guys out there. I mentioned 2 guys out of Florida who I think it's very interesting that Calipari was just there. 2 to keep an eye on. And wasn't Brad Calipari, John Calipari's son, part of the Vanderbilt program when Van Allen Lubin was there? That's another thing that there's a connection there, something to remember. Brad Calipari's been in Fayetteville. I fully expect he'll be one of the guys, along with Bruiser Flint, at some point formally announced in some way to Arkansas staff. Will Arkansas have another commitment come off the board? We had an early day commitment. These are rare. We've had one morning commitment with Billy Richmond on a Friday. Most of the commitments have come after 5 p.m. This is one that's come during the day for Arkansas. Not in the morning, though. It was our afternoon. Usually, I don't think Arkansas's had a single multiple commitment day. So it's probably it for the day with Adou Thiero off the board. We're going through Arkansas's needs. I've talked about the lead guard, point guard, even a combo guard. We've talked about the Florida connections and what Arkansas needs on the front line. And I think, again, versatile 4s, guys that can step out and face the basket a little bit, guys that can stretch a little bit. We know Big Z can do that, but he's going to be mostly a center, I think. I think most of his minutes will be at the 5 spot and some alternation with Jonas Adou. He's really more of a 15-foot in kind of scorer, mostly around the basket, but some in the mid-range, but really more of a rim runner type, getting in that dunker spot, getting out in transition, playing behind the defense. If you play 2-man game with him and he short rolls or shallow rolls or set screens on the elbows and you get him the ball there, he might, if you leave him wide open, he's going to take that shot. And he's competent, 14, 15 feet in. But so we're talking about, stretch 4 types that can also play the 5 for you, give you production on the glass. I mentioned Pryor at 8 rebounds per game, Van Allen Lubin at 6.3. So that's good enough. And guys that can give you a little stretch ability, like I said, out to the 3-point line. So I really like both of those guys for what Calipari's trying to do. I have said I think Arkansas needs a banger, somebody that can go in there and be a physical guy, maybe a Kamani Johnson type of guy. I don't know who's out there that you would consider a 1 or a 1A or a 1B level target, but there may be some guys that you just need a guy like that, and he doesn't have to be the most talented guy in the world. And maybe not the most coveted guy. So those are kind of some things I have identified on that front line. I still think there's a possibility that Calipari goes after someone that's pushing 6'10" or more beyond Case and Pryor, that may not bring you all that face-up versatility that a Pryor does, or even a 6'8" Lubin does, but maybe another guy with some length and height and another rim protector development type piece. I'm not so sure that that's not still out there. Okay, so we're talking about some of these needs. Another Florida guy, let's shift back to the backcourt, Wooga Poplar, still on the board. Arkansas's been involved there, and he played at Miami last season. So that, 14 points, 13, 14 points per game. Big time 3-point shooter, 38.5% efficiency from there, over 2 assists per game, 6'5", good frame, maybe could slide over and help you at the 1 some. I don't know that I really believe that, but I'm not ruling that out. Another guy in Florida is Chaz Lanier. North Florida, the Ospreys, big 6'6" wing, big score. And I wonder, with being a big wing, a 6'6" wing with Adou Thiero off the board now, if he would even be in play for Arkansas. But another elite 3-point shooter, volume 3-point shooter, over 3 makes per game. You want a knockdown shooter on that wing. Adou Thiero is not a guy that checks that box. He may be emerging there, but does not check that box. I think guys like Versatile guys like Carter Knox could be a volume guy and have efficiency there. Obviously, John L. Davis shoots the three efficiently. He's also a good spot up shooter. That's probably where Carter Knox needs to get better. He creates a lot off the bounce, a lot of work in two-man game, but spot up 3-point shooting. Be really nice to have a guy where less is more. And I think John L. Davis can be that at times, but he's also a guy that you want on the ball a lot. Wooga Poplar may be one of those guys that can bring, if you were on him and get him involved. But another Florida guy. So there's a lot of Florida opportunities there with John Calipari down there. And so you just wonder with some of these names I mentioned how that plays out. One of the guys we've talked about for a while that hasn't dropped for Arkansas would be a UK transfer with 6'8", 6'9", Jordan Bergs. Versatile guy. I've reported that he's on board and as a private commit. And I just wonder as things started to progress a little bit later with Adou Thiero, if that changes anything for him. I've heard some rumors that maybe he was on Georgetown's campus recently. Unconfirmed. I'm calling those rumors, not even reporting, just rumors. I don't know if that's true or not. Haven't been able to chase that down. But a guy that, Calipari out, when Calipari makes those rounds and takes the players and their families to dinner, gets them on campus. Multiple reports that he was in Fayetteville around the time Big Z dropped, was able to confirm that he was there. But as that one's taken longer to drop, it's made me wonder, and I've mentioned this in a few other platforms, including this one prior, was Calipari holding him off a little bit? Is this one of those things? Does Adou Thiero change things for Jordan Bergs? Going public with that commitment. That could be one of those mutual parting of ways types of things later, or maybe it's not at all. Maybe it's just a timing thing, and there's a reason why it hasn't dropped yet, and he remains on board with the Hogs. One thing I can tell you, if Calipari wants him in Arkansas, he'll be at Arkansas. Does the Adou Thiero addition, because there's similarities in how they project in terms of positionally, how they help you as 3-4s. One guy's got more experience. One guy's actually projected into the 2025 first round draft based on his trajectory and development, not only physically and still growing, but some of the other stuff he brings to the table. That I don't know yet. So, it's so interesting to me, though, what's left out there. There's still a lot of quality. Cal's not going to babysit James and his kid. Goodman is saying that Theo is sort of a draft. I missed part of that. I'm missing some of the comments today. I'm going to try to get to them. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please drop down and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. We love doing these. Arkansas picks up the 7th commitment today. John Calipari lands. Talented, versatile. Man, the versatility. He's not getting many of his former players. Well, several of them are in the NBA draft. You got 4 of them at the draft combine. You got Aaron Bradshaw off to Ohio State, who that was going to happen. That wasn't something Cal was looking to keep. That wasn't a situation. Cal brought the 7-footer that he wanted from Kentucky. That was Big Z. By the way, Big Z's twin brother, Tomislav, I don't know how to pronounce it, Tomislav Ivisic, committed to Illinois today. 7'1" center. I guess they list Big Z at 7'2", but we knew he had a twin commitment to Illinois today. I think that's interesting. Give Lawson Blake a scholarship. Yeah, I mean, you've got Ugana Onyenso, which probably now when you start looking at how the big man dominoes fell, Big Cliff Amarui from Rutgers to Alabama. North Carolina was hoping that would play. North Carolina was hoping Jonas Adou would play. Didn't work out. It could be that the shot block, the 7-foot rim protector, who was a sophomore last year for Cal at Kentucky, moves on there. But again, to say he didn't get many players out of Kentucky, you got to kind of qualify that with getting key guys. If he gets DJ Wagner, that's 3 of the remaining guys. Again, 4 guys into the NBA draft, and then some other guy. He got half the recruiting class that was coming in for Kentucky, and he got the ones that he wanted there. So he prized out the guys that he wanted. I'll put it that way to this point. A total of 5 from Kentucky when you add up the high school recruits plus the 2 players that were in the portal. I think DJ Wagner could be in play. And I think Jordan Bergs, again, if that doesn't happen, it's only because Calipari, the Adou Thiero thing came a little bit slower. There was some thought because he was talking about going pro. There was some consideration for hiring an agent. But when you look at his final five, look at the final five. It was Arkansas, hometown school Pitt, plays in the ACC, but it was North Carolina. North Carolina went hard after this guy. North Carolina coveted Adou Thiero, didn't get him. Indiana, say what you will about Indiana's program, but one of the most successful programs historically in college basketball, but also Woodson, despite results, is recruiting the hell out of it up there. Gets a lot of big-time players to come there. So Arkansas, Calipari does it, still on the mountaintop, man. Somebody said DJ visited last week. I mean, right. Hearing that stuff and hearing it for 2 weeks. So we'll see. He definitely visited Southern Cal, or at least that was the word, reported a lot on. So but I think it's one of those situations where thanks for the great job. Thank you for saying that. Kentucky-Arkansas rivalry is officially on. Look, man, Arkansas and Kentucky should play round robin, home and away every single season. Absolutely. Before John Calipari came to Arkansas historically, when you look at everything, not only success on the court, but facilities, Bud Walton Arena, the atmosphere, everything, ticket sales, all of it. It's Kentucky and Arkansas 1-2. Now that Calipari's at Arkansas, it raises the stakes. The best college recruiter ever, and still going that way. People want to lay it all on the high school stuff. Well, the transfer portal era has passed him by. Really? Really? Look what he's done in the portal. Big Z has a pathway to the NBA. There's potential there. Adou Thiero is projected in the 2025 draft. And then you've got two of the top 10 portal guys in the country, Jonas Adou and Nelly Davis, committed. Man, I don't know what else to say. Calipari's put together, arguably combining high school and the portal, the top recruiting class in the country. That's debatable, I guess, but bring it, stack them up, get those resumes together. But I think it's very interesting. By the way, Caleb Battle committed to Gonzaga, so he's off the board. Kentucky's claiming they don't want Adou Thiero. Okay. He was among I was going off the list, and I didn't mention Kentucky, but that was one of his top 5 options, was a return to Kentucky. Mentioned Indiana, Pitt, North Carolina, Arkansas. Kentucky was one of those top 5 options. So, say what you will, but is one win at NCAA championships. This guy has 6 Final Fours, 2 national title game appearances, one championship. His teams are consistently ranked in the top 10, top 15 in college basketball. They finish well in the SEC. They win more SEC tournaments than anybody since he's been there. They've won plenty of conference championships. There has been a recent problem area with NCAA tournament postseason the last 5 years. Zero doubt about that. Okay? Can't completely blow that out and say that doesn't matter at all. But everything else is elite with this guy. And he's been elite in the NCAA tournament. So to rule out that Arkansas can't be good in the postseason because of recent years at Kentucky is not accurate, I don't think. And I do think he's got something to prove. I don't think he had 30 plus million reasons to stay put. And he's moved on to another opportunity. And I think John Calipari comes at this guns a-blazing. He's recruiting that way. He always has. His teams are always, for the most part, always really good. And now, what is he going to do in postseason moving forward? It's a valid question, but I think he's not riding off into the sunset. I think he's embracing a new challenge with a lot more in the tank. That's how I perceive it. Is that wishful thinking? So far so good, but we know he's a great recruiter. Again, he's the greatest to ever do it. So none of us are shocked by these results so far. And look, there are going to be spins on everything. All fan bases do it. Some things can be delusional. It's really hard to look at Calipari's track record overall, the arc of the career, and do a whole bunch of complaining. I'll tell you something else. I talked to a lot of folks tied to the NBA, a lot of folks that are in Division One basketball as coaches, a lot of assistant coaches that I talked to from around the country. And so far, not a single negative word, not a single negative word about this guy, his process, who he is, how he does things. It's mostly recognition of excellence. And so there's that. I've not heard anybody I'm talking to behind the scenes off the record say, you know what, the guy can't coach. Haven't heard anybody say that. And I'd tell you, I wouldn't tell you who it is, but I'd say, hey, there's this thought. I'd have been talking about that by now. Nope, not out there. Nothing I've heard like that. All right, 45 minutes in. We're going to probably cap it at an hour like we typically do. I want to thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live as we go through the positives. What Arkansas's added in Adou Thiero. I think it's a big statement that Calipari lands a guy, a guy following him from Kentucky. I think it helps Arkansas because of the continuity and the understanding of what his expectations are on and off the court. All the little details. He's going to help convey that to other guys. You bring in veteran guys in who aren't first kid time around the block kids, and Jonas Adou and Nelly Davis. In some regards, Big Z's still kind of a freshman, only played 15 games last year. But having said all that, no matter what the experience level is, guys haven't had experience with Calipari yet. Adou Thiero has. On some level, Big Z has. I mentioned, we've talked some about DJ Wagner. If you get him, another guy that's been there, done that with Cal, and is going to be your coach on the court as a lead guard in tandem with Boogie Fland, if that's who it is. We got all kinds of comments flying in here. Kentucky's having a good recruiting class out of the portal. It looks that way, pretty good. Maybe more on board. We went through some of Arkansas's needs. Again, I think help at the lead guard, maybe a little bit more experience in your backcourt, whether it's a guy that's going to handle the ball or not. Wooga Poplar, mentioned his name, mentioned DJ Wagner. Kadari Richmond still out there. Chaz Lanier still out there, a guy that can shoot it. Jackson Robinson still out there. You haven't heard any smoke with the return to Arkansas. He's in the pro process. He's been invited to the combine. Is he a guy that comes back? It's thought Kentucky, speaking of Kentucky, might be in the lead to get him as well, as a guy that can shoot it, stretch the floor. Doesn't need a lot of basketball moves, not a lot of pound the ball to get into his. He's a spot up, catch and shoot kind of guy. Coming out of BYU and had a successful year. Was he the sixth man of the year in the Big 12? I believe that's right. NCAA tournament team, a team that was ranked. Mark Pope did a good job there, so you think maybe he follows Pope, have more success there. Not an SEC, didn't have a lot of success in the SEC, playing at A&M, then Arkansas. But not, he was also a guy that moved up in classification and really should have been a high school senior when he was a freshman during the COVID year at A&M and didn't see a lot of running. Then at Arkansas, Eric Mulsman really didn't use him much. Are we recruiting a point guard? Yes, I think Arkansas is in the mix for several guys that can be your point guard. I mentioned two names, DJ Wagner, Kadari Richmond. Boogie Fland, I think, is going to get the ball in his hands a lot. I think he's going to have a role on this team that's significant. You look at Calipari, he's always done it that way when he brings five-star guys in. They play. Very few exceptions where they're not a big part of the mix. And you saw the backcourt last year thrive in his system. All those young guards. DJ Wagner, only an exception, I think, because of the high ankle sprain, and still averaged 10 points, 3.5 assists, and it better than 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Guy was a solid player on an NCAA tournament team, a team ranked top 10 most of the year. He was a big part of that. I think he knocked down 4 threes, by the way, against Arkansas. Is that right? 3 or 4, bang, bang, bang. I mean, he was knocking them down. I had a good game against the Hogs in Lexington. So, what was amazing, too, those matchups, you saw Calipari with a high-octane offense most of the year. Both teams score over 100 in Lexington. Kentucky wins that. But earlier in January in Fayetteville, it was a slugfest. It was a down-in-the-mud 63-57 Kentucky win. And so Kentucky, matched Arkansas pretty much in toughness. Arkansas wasn't the toughest team out there, struggled with that. Kentucky was a good matchup for the Hogs in that way. But Kentucky found a way to win both games playing two different styles. We know it wasn't a good Arkansas team, but Arkansas had good personnel. It was good enough to win some big games, not many, but beat some good teams or compete against good teams at times during the season. But Caleb Battle off to Gonzaga, I mentioned that. I've told you guys Devo Davis has been silently committed to Oklahoma State for a couple of weeks. The longer that goes, it makes me wonder, is he waffling on that? It hasn't been made public yet. Could there be anything in the works behind the scenes to bring him to Arkansas? I've heard nothing in any momentum in that regard. Layden Blocker is interesting. You hear different things about him, but not much. Nothing that's public. I've got stuff behind the scenes on that I'm not at liberty to talk about. If I was, it wouldn't point you in any one particular place. Maybe a few places that are under consideration, but nothing where it's been zeroed in that I'm aware of. Excuse me. Crackling a little bit as we get move over 50 minutes into this. HogvilleNET YouTube Live, thank you for joining me. I love doing these, especially after a John Calipari commitment lands. They're always big time. They're always top shelf guys. Man, it's the old saying, the trappings. I mean, it's just riches after riches after riches at each position group. And now you're just thinking about depth when you backfill it. I think now that we're 7 players in, we're probably going to see two, maybe 3 big names pop in terms of guys. When I say big names, that are coveted by big programs and that are anywhere from 1A, 1B list level type of guys. And then I think, the final 3 may not be quite at that level, but still what Calipari envisions can help him on a 13-man roster. Is there a possibility he doesn't fill all 13 scholarships? Of course. But I think if you get your most coveted guys, you get 9 to 10 guys, your most coveted group on campus and ready to go for that first summer session, for those first groups of workouts. When you talk about the academic part, first summer session, getting on the court for limited practices, then you could potentially take your time a little bit rounding things out with other guys to backfill spots 11, 12, and 13. Or he may get all 13 as we wrap up May. I just don't know how that lands. We know there's some staff. I'm going to talk a little bit about staff. Staff updates last week. What we reported the day before Calipari was formally announced at Arkansas, although we knew he was already hired, he was going to bring as many as 6 staffers with him from Kentucky. Well, 2 of those have been formally named now. Guys that are not surprises at all. Chin Coleman and Chuck Martin. Chin Coleman is associate head coach. We know Kenny Payne was hired as associate head coach. Arkansas has 2 of those. Kenny Payne, Chin Coleman. Chuck Martin, assistant coach. Bruiser Flint will be I believe he's going to be locked into some staff appointment. Same with Brad Calipari. Those guys have been in Fayetteville. Ronnie Burr Jr., still hanging around. I think he's going to be part of this staff one way or another. Joe Johnson's name came back up again lately. I'd heard some momentum for a while, and I reported that he was in serious consideration for a spot on the staff. Didn't hear some stuff for a while, and then started hearing it again. That's still breathing. It's not out of the realm of possibility, or maybe even at some point going to be announced that Joe Johnson, the Hogs icon, future Naismith Hall of Famer, that would be huge in my opinion. It would be huge for Joe Johnson and in concert with Ronnie Burr Jr. are part of this staff in some way. It just adds to the regalness of everything. It puts in some of that, more of that Razorback royalty in with this college basketball royalty that is John Calipari. Let's not forget, before Cal came to Arkansas, it's a proud, storied program, arguably a top 15 program all time. Not far away from, when you look at back-to-back Elite Eights followed by a Sweet 16, if Calipari's able to not only make the recruiting top 5, top 1 or 2 every year, top 5 worst case scenario, but actually get some of those not only in-season results but postseason results, Arkansas can inch its way back to being arguably a top 10 program all time. At one point, some of the analysts out there after the Nolan years had Arkansas in the top 7 or 8. It's been a while, and Arkansas's but I still think it's a top 15 program when you look at everything, and I think it could be inching closer back to top 10. And as long as Calipari stays there year to year, Arkansas could be a top 5 to 10 program just based on those seasons. Potentially, I'm not predicting that's going to happen. I can't say for sure that'll happen, but it's there. But keeping continuity, we talked about Adou Thiero, roster continuity. Just mentioned the assistant coaches that have been brought over. Along with Calipari, we expected those. There'll be more. We just went through those names. So what else is out there? What other things do we need to talk about right now? because I think we've hit on most of it. I go back to this idea that things may seem slow based on what you were used to with the previous coaching staff, where they loaded up on a bunch of portal guys in a matter of days. Things may seem slow, stagnant, but they're really not. I mean, this is John Calipari's pace. This is how he does things. And I don't think it's going to be fast. I don't think it's slow. It's obviously not fast, but I don't frame it as slow either. It may seem that way to some, but it's just not. It's just right. I think it's just right because it's how he does it, and he's the best in the business. And so when I start looking at the time markers again, you got 3 more weeks before you really start, or 2 to 3 weeks before you start moving on to campus and starting that first summer session, and then you can go through, get your physicals, get cleared, and go through those early workouts. Those are only a few weeks away, and you've got 7 guys on board. Now you've got more than half your roster, 6 to go, and I think 2 or 3 of those are going to be those level 1A, 1B type guys, and the rest will help backfill it. But I think Arkansas's in great shape based on the timeline, and I'll be surprised if we don't see at least 1 or 2 more names come off the board this week. I probably could have said that sooner. But then you guys are going to ask me, who is it? I've got some thoughts on that. I may actually have some inside track on 1 or 2 things there. But I want to see it play out. I want to see, I want to be able to confirm who has been on campus or who is coming on campus. To me, that's what's big there. And we didn't even talk about 2025 recruiting, where Arkansas's got a visitor coming in, Darius Acuff Jr., May 10th. So this weekend, 5-star, top 10 rated guard, IMG Academy by way of Detroit. 6'3" point guard, big time recruit, scheduled for a visit. Malik Thomas, another guard, class of 2025, 5-star. He's got Arkansas on his sights for an upcoming visit. You got Caleb Wilson, top 5 power forward, loves Arkansas. Arkansas may be the leader for his services, 5-star. You got a lot of stuff going on. You got some in-state guys that are already starting to get some attention from Arkansas. It's not as saturated. You haven't seen offers yet. But there's been some initial outreach. I reported that last week. Just thought I'd mention that again as we close in on an hour and wrap things up here on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Hope you'll hit the subscribe button. AJ DeBonsa and the Boozer twins. Those are more that have gotten Arkansas offers since Calipari's been here. DeBonsa, the number 1 rated player, 5-star in that class, picked up an Arkansas offer. The Boozer twins also. Arkansas is trying to get a visit from those guys but you got to remember, the early signing periods in November, even with 5-stars, sometimes when they wait a while, you're seeing less of that because of the transfer portal, go ahead and getting it out of the way. But also with Calipari, we've seen him bring in and get plenty of his 5-star guys on board and signed in the early period. That's just coming up November. So that means between now, when you've got all your spring and summer grassroots events, live eval coming up in 2 weeks, where coaches can go on the road. There'll be more of that in June, a lot of it in July. So you got a lot of stuff going on recruiting in between those times. And then when you get out of the July period, when you get out of the live eval stuff and being on the road and playing in these different circuit events, now you're going to have guys even ramp up their visits because of that November early period, mid-November early signing period. And so you're trying to get guys on board. So you get, as much as we're talking about completing this roster, Calipari's got a lot of irons in the fire for that 2025 class and maintaining that high level of bringing top level guys in and getting them on board and getting them signed. And so this recruiting, these next several months, it's not going to just dry up once we see a roster filled out in the next several weeks and maybe months through the summer for this particular roster. But moving forward to get to that early period, again, I think we're going to see Arkansas not only get commitments, but get guys signed. And there'll be some more 5-stars in there, a la John Calipari specialty. Wow. Just about to roll 60 minutes. When you really start thinking about all of it, we thought Eric Musselman, there were so many news drops. I won't keep talking about him, but there was a lot of news drops and it was always busy and there was this and that. But with John Calipari, again, it may move a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, the news drops are huge. And there's constant stuff actually going on. When you start hearing about the offers going out, setting guys up for visits, bringing them in, all that stuff, you're going to see a lot more results. The processes are different, but the results, I think, Calipari, it speaks for itself. They're the best out there. They have been for decades. and I see that continuing so far at Arkansas. All right, we're hitting an hour now. I want to thank you one last time for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We've just had our analysis, 1 hour long analysis about Adou Thiero committing to Arkansas from Kentucky to Arkansas. Eat it, Wildcats fans, just to eat it. And we talked about a lot more what could be in the future here, just down on the horizon. So until next time, we'll be on as soon as something else breaks. But until then, see you then, and go down there and hit that subscribe button if you hadn't already. Thanks again.